Good evening and welcome back to another episode of the Since I Was Young podcast, bringing you all things Heart of Midlothian. The week that began with a trip to Azerbaijan to take on the Dynamo Minsk in our Europa Conference League opener, which ended with a trip to Pittodrie to take on in-form Aberdeen in rather more familiar surroundings. I'm delighted this evening, as ever, to be joined by John to, as I say, give our thoughts on the last two games, as well as the managerial situation and the fallout from that. And obviously, as we enter into an international break, where Hearts will be going. Obviously, there's been lots of speculation around managerial appointments, and we'll certainly give our musings and thoughts on that. But before we get dived into it, as per usual, folks, the usual pleasantries and such, feel free to give us a like, a follow. All our social media links can be found in the description, as well as if you would be so kind as to drop us a subscription to the YouTube channel, just head down, hit the subscribe button. Any support is massively appreciated because, as I've said countless times on this, your feedback allows us to tailor our content to what you want to hear and what you want us to discuss. So without you, there is no podcast ultimately. So as I say, please feel free to drop us a subscription if you haven't done so already. That would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, I've done a little bit of rambling there at 100 miles an hour. But John, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, mate. How are you? Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to step in.
Aye, mate, I'm good. We were just talking off camera there about how our days have gone. I've had quite a long day, but delighted to be home and having a chance to sit down with your good self and discuss the wonderful, I was going to say sinking ship, but we're not quite sunk yet, Heart of Midlothian. But let's just get dived straight in, shall we? I don't know what your thoughts were, but I'll certainly ask for them in due course. Obviously, the trip to Azerbaijan to take on Dynamo Minsk in the Conference League opener. You and I spoke about this in the last episode. I kind of treated the game as a bit of a sort of exhibition. It almost felt like a bonus game to kind of escape from the realities of Scottish football at the moment. A bit of a nice change of scenery, a wee bit of a change of pace as well. The only disappointing factor, obviously, with it being behind closed doors, the lack of fans was obviously felt, and it gave it kind of a strange vibe for me. I don't know what you thought about the game in general, but that was certainly the takeaway that I had. Certainly, aside from the result, of course.
First thought that I had was that it felt eerily similar to that season we spent in the Championship, where the Hearts team that we had at the time should have absolutely brushed aside everything else in that division. But I think Robbie Nielsen spoke on the Scarves Around the Funnel podcast around that time, saying how the absence of the Hearts fans really affected the players. And knowing that, that made me a wee bit worried that that could potentially happen again, because it was again, yeah, it was like one of those COVID games where it was just no atmosphere whatsoever, and you always kind of wonder how that might play on the players' minds. I think you actually yourself, Aldo, I think it was you that mentioned last week on the show with Ewan that you kind of felt like it might be a positive because you felt like it would be a good chance for them to get the fans off their back a wee bit. Because let's be
Yeah.
honest, like we have been on their backs quite brutally in recent weeks, largely merited, quite frankly. But I think with your words last week in mind, I think that bore fruit because we came away with 3 points in an opening win in our Conference League. It was left late. Jan Danda scored his first Hearts goal in quite dramatic fashion. Lovely to see, as you and I have privately discussed quite a bit. We would love to see Danda get a more solid place in the team. I think this week in Minsk, well, not in Minsk, in Azerbaijan, and also in the game against Aberdeen, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure. I think, has had a pretty decent wee audition as a potential first choice starter. But great to grab the 3 points. We saw, I think, a lot of strides taken in the Minsk game. A lot more organised looking, quite a bit more creative. The defence for the Minsk goal was once again sort of switched off, and that seems to be a massive Achilles heel for Hearts this year. I don't know if it's been potentially the case that the unsettled nature of the structure of the four could potentially be an aspect of it. I don't know if it's low confidence. I've got some thoughts on the defensive display against Aberdeen that I'll go into later, but when it comes to like the season as a whole and in Minsk, that one moment of switching off, uh, as soon as they scored that goal, I was like, oh, here we go again. Of
Yeah,
course, what was the guy's name? Was it Pasalovic or something like that? Was his name?
uh,
The Minsk captain. He scored an absolute beezer of a header for us to equalise. But great to see some shots from the edge of the area as well.
yeah,
Shankland turned an absolute beauty of a shot that was just punched away by the goalkeeper. Um, so yeah, much more positive display. And also great to finally get a competitive win under our belts in the
yeah,
24-25 season.
yeah,
That's
completely,
kind of all I've
completely.
got to say about the Minsk game. I think it's could potentially be a nice building block for some confidence down the road.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's entirely fair. To be honest with you, and you're right. You know, I kind of thought the lack of fans would be a helpful thing because, you know, obviously our football fans and Hearts fans in general are amazing, and they obviously travel here, there, and everywhere. And I'm sure, given the
Yeah,
opportunity, they would have taken a pretty incredible, you know, attendance to the game in Azerbaijan. But it is what it is, and obviously the reasons are, you know, quite clear as to why it was behind closed doors and all that. So it did have a bit of an eerie feel to it. I think you're right there, and like you said, it certainly reminded me of COVID football. I think that is probably the best comparison you can make. But in terms of, you know, you've summed it up amazingly well with the goals, etc. I think the main things that I kind of took from the game were it wasn't a great game of football to watch. The 90 minutes was pretty average at best,
yeah.
and that's maybe putting it lightly. I
Hmm.
felt like you said about Danda. I thought he was absolutely outstanding when he came on the pitch. Proved what, you know, what he can offer. Obviously, in the starting lineup, we had Barry Mackay and James Forrest. No, Alan Forrest. Wish it was James Forrest at this point. But yeah, so we had Barry Mackay and Alan Forrest in the wings, and I think we'll kind of touch on them as we go along. But certainly both were withdrawn during the game and brought on for Vargas and Danda. Um, and I felt like both of those two were an upgrade on the two that started the game. But again, we'll speak about that as we go on. I think the thing that sort of pleased me the most as well is Blair Spittal. For me, I think has shown in the last few games, certainly the last two games, that he does have what it takes and does look like he could be a decent player for us. I think weeks ago, maybe somewhat naively of me, I maybe kind of wrote him off and said I hadn't seen anywhere near enough, but I'll factor that down to being a square peg in a round hole and kind of shuffled around the place before he's finally found his actual position. So I'll give credit to Liam Fox about that. But again, we'll touch on him later. But no, in terms of the game itself, fantastic to start with a win, particularly away from home. I think, given all the kind of uncertainty and given the behind closed doors nature of it, I think had and the distance to travel as well. I think if somebody had said to me prior to kickoff we were going to take a point home with us, I probably would have taken that. Just as I say, due to the awkwardness of the travel, etc. So to come away with 3 points, albeit with a last minute goal, was a very very nice change, and it certainly felt somewhat unusual to celebrate a Hearts win, the first Hearts win for 145 days, which seems
Yeah.
just bizarre, but it just kind of highlights just where we are. But yeah, what it does is it puts us in a very good position in terms of qualification. I know we're only one game in; we've still got 5 games to go, but taking points away from home is a massive massive bonus. And you know, obviously up next we have Ammonia Nicosia at Tynecastle after the international break. Well, after St Mirren and then the international break. So yeah, will be nice to kind of go into that having already got 3 points on the board. But yeah, certainly by all means not a classic in Azerbaijan, but as I say, a win is a win, and we take it from there. But yeah, we'll kind of move on to the game that followed. Obviously, they returned back to Scotland not long after the Azerbaijan trip, and they, rather than returning to Edinburgh, they went straight to Aberdeen. You know, to avoid obviously any extra travel, any additional travel that was necessary, they went straight to Aberdeen to prepare for the game at Pittodrie against a high flying, in form, full of confidence Aberdeen side. I was not sure how the game was going to go. If I'm honest with you, I felt somewhat unsure due to the fact that the fixture, as we know, tends to favour the home side in these fixtures. We seem to ourselves in Aberdeen seem to trade 3 points whenever we're visiting each other's stadiums. We just tend to leave with nothing. So I was a little bit concerned, but equally there was an element of it for me, like you said about the Minsk game and the building blocks and the confidence that that would have given the players. I felt somewhat confident, but not really, maybe not outwardly confident, as to not end up with egg on one's face if we didn't then win the game. But yeah, having sort of watched the Aberdeen game and the way that it went, I think there are lots of things that we can touch on and lots of points that we'll make, but there are building blocks being put in place, and you could see it against Aberdeen that there were further building blocks. I think when I looked at the starting lineup for the Aberdeen game and you saw the 4-3-3 system again, Liam Fox clearly favouring that shape, which is a huge
As well as should.
positive. Yeah. I mean, between that and a 4-4-2, we might be getting somewhere. But the 4-3-3 being favoured for the second week in a row clearly shows what Liam Fox's kind of preferred system is and his identity of what he wants the team to do for him. And we're seeing shoots of that, shall we say, I would suggest. But obviously, the Aberdeen game kicked off, and I was full of confidence and quite looking forward to it. And then, in typical Hearts fashion, we concede right at the start and give ourselves a mountain to climb.
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts were on the first goal, but it was one of those we get caught out, the ball gets played back, and then obviously it deflects in off of I think it was Kai Rolls that got the unfortunate deflection that just looped it over them into the back of the net. Gave Aberdeen the perfect start and certainly maybe took any wind that we had out of our sails. But that wasn't the best of starts.
No, it wasn't. Aberdeen have been matching Celtic, who are domestically this season so far are an absolute juggernaut, step for step. I felt going into the Aberdeen game that it was the worst possible time to come up against them. Like, I think if we had come up against a sort of bottom six team coming off of that win in Azerbaijan, that would have presented such a fantastic opportunity for us to finally get that league win and start to. And then once you've won one, then you win a league game. That's suddenly you've won two in a row. This time last year, Hearts went on a run where I think they was at 12 or 13 unbeaten, and it all starts with one and then two, and then all of a sudden 3-4 weeks later you're on quite a decent run of form. But we came up against a very, very good Aberdeen side, and that first minute could not have been a worse start for Hearts. The response was excellent, but your question was regarding the response to the first goal. Kingsley giving away the ball in the fashion that he did was both surprising and extremely irritating. He was then left well out of position. He should have been tracking back to the left back position. There was absolutely no one guarding the left side of the box. Malachi Boateng was uncharacteristically bullied in the lead up to their goal. He kind of looked as if he was a bit lost. I think Kingsley was partially to blame for that, because as soon as Kingsley's caught out of position where he is, Boateng has one eye on where Kingsley should be, and I think that he ended up sort of hamstrung in that scenario. I don't know what Rolls is doing, because I've seen the goal a few times, and from all appearances, it looked as though Craig Gordon quite comfortably had that. It was a daft decision to just kind of get in the way of like Gordon making what probably looked like it was going to be quite a routine save. And then all of a sudden, 53 seconds was it into the game, Aberdeen are 1-0 up. It is a nightmare scenario for us in that situation, because we were going into that game as, quite frankly, underdogs. Like you point out, we haven't won at Pittodrie since, I believe, 2016. Mm-hmm. So it's like 8 years ago. And that old Aberdeen haven't won at Tynecastle for a long time, like you say. That has been a fixture that has very heavily favoured the home side. So for us to finally get that win in Azerbaijan against Dinamo, get the idea in our heads that maybe we can start the turnaround. We come up against an unbeaten Aberdeen side, right? You have to play everybody, so it's going to happen at some point. Not an ideal time to get them, but fine. And then a minute in, they are 1-0 up, and it is once again a lapse by not one but at least two individuals in that defence that has caused that scenario. And it harks back, I think, to what Naismith was saying early in the season. A lot of people kind of plastered him as this excuse merchant when he was saying that it's individual errors that are the undoing of Hearts in a lot of games. Sometimes that hasn't been the case, and I think that the 4-3-3 system that you touched on, this team looks a hell of a lot more balanced in that system. That, to me, screams that Liam Fox has been watching this team, and he has gone in there with an idea that 4-3-3 suits it far better than the 4-2-3-1 and sometimes the back three that Naismith was switching to from game to game and from minute to minute. That is entirely on him. But for me, that shows that there is the potential for this team to be a top 3, top 4 team if they use the same system and they stick to the same system, but they need to cut out the individual errors, and they are especially troublesome on defence. Kai Rolls was left on his arse later on in the game for their second. And Kingsley getting caught so far out of position. It seems like Frankie Kent as well. Frankie Kent messed up quite badly on the second goal.
Yeah.
Guys, come on. We need to cut that out.
Yeah, well, obviously we had I spoke to you in last week about it, and we were kind of talking about the team, and I said the one concern I have is Stephen Kingsley at left back. I don't think he's got the legs to play that role anymore. As much as I think he's a capable player, I don't think he's got the engine for left back anymore. In certain games he could probably do it, but in the bigger games I don't think so. And I was always kind of fearing, when I looked at Aberdeen's lineup, I was kind of fearing the wide areas for them as well, because we had Stephen Kingsley at left back and we had Oyugoki at right back, who I wasn't particularly fond of, to tell you the truth, but I didn't think he had a bad game. Certainly not as bad as I was maybe expecting him to be honest, which is maybe a bit of a disservice to him. But Stephen Kingsley was replaced after 20 minutes by James Penrice, who I thought was incredibly unfortunate to not start the game. In the light of all the sort of summer recruitment that we've done, I would say James Penrice has certainly been the one up to now anyway. Probably him and Boateng, I would say, but James Penrice for me seems to be the one that's kind of been the sort of standout so far, which is difficult to say when your team's bottom of the league. But even, I didn't mention it, but no, I was just going to say,
Penrice, to be fair, sorry.
No, you're quite right. No.
Penrice, to be fair, has amongst the new arrivals been the one that's been given the chance, I think.
Perhaps.
He's been the guy who's gotten the most minutes, but I absolutely agree with what you're saying, and that he has been a standout. He feels to me like our left back now. He is probably the guy who I would put on the team sheet as the primary left back on this team. Like you say, Kingsley probably doesn't have the legs. He's a very solid centre back option when he concentrates and is on his game. I think confidence across the back line is quite low, and I think that the uncertainty around right back probably doesn't help. That's not a settled unit. However, I completely agree with Penrice. I just wanted to interject for that.
You're quite right. You're quite right. I was just going to say, Penrice was he was responsible for the corner that led to that own goal in Minsk in the previous game, and he was also, I believe, the corner taker for our equaliser. That came from a Frankie Kent header when Shanklin sort of hooked the ball back across the goal, and Frankie Kent headed it in beyond the goalkeeper. I felt like at that point, like you said, our response to going 1-0 down was actually pretty solid, and we did have some chances, and we were certainly making inroads. George Grant had a chance that he hit straight at the goalkeeper. Either side of him, it's a goal, but he hits it straight at the keeper. And then obviously we get the equaliser, and at that point, I was sort of thinking, right, do you know what? We deserve that. Like, we're on level terms and we deserve to be. Shanklin picked up a booking not long before that as well. And I think, I'll touch on Shanklin later.
Shankland also sclaffed a high boot that he put in when I feel like he should have tried to head it, because it was literally within the 6-yarder. If he'd gone for the head, I think that's an easy goal. Yeah, it was. It was Danda put in a fantastic ball, quite a wicked ball, and then rather than try to head it, Shankland goes in with a high boot and just sclaffs it right over the bar. When you're going up from under the ball at that distance, you're not going to put it anywhere but into the sky. Like, it's not. I don't know what he's thinking there, and it's not the first time this season that Shankland's made such an error.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I was just pleased to see a delivery actually going to him. That was refreshing, and we've not seen much of that this season. To be fair,
I think that the crossing and the delivery that Danda presents is, for me, the standout attribute that's been missing that he brings to the table. A lot's made of his set piece abilities and stuff, his dead ball abilities, but the crosses that he's putting in, the combination really of him and Penrice, with the deliveries that Penrice is putting in from corners, Hearts have been absolutely screaming out for that for a couple of seasons, it feels like. And it feels like now we finally have guys that have those attributes that we have been sorely needing. We just need all the other kind of pieces to fall into place now.
No, completely agree. I didn't even really touch on it, but I'll mention it now because I just looked down at my notes there. Obviously, the starting lineup we had in Minsk featured Barry Mackay and Forrest, as I said previously. But for the Aberdeen game, they were both benched in favour of obviously Danda getting a start, as well as Kenny Vargas, who came back into the team
Yeah.
following a substitute appearance in Minsk. I didn't think he was particularly brilliant in Minsk, to tell you the truth, but he put in his usual shift,
Yeah,
his usual
I don't, I
energy-filled
don't,
shift.
yeah, I don't think that Vargas has been particularly brilliant in general this season. I give him
Well, well,
probably a B plus for effort.
yeah,
But in terms of the technical side of the game and actually executing, it feels like he has made the absolute incorrect decision at 100% of the time, which I'm sure
yep.
we'll touch on in a bit. But
Oh yes,
he's frustrating me a bit, I must admit. And I've
oh
kind of
yes.
touted him as potentially being a cult figure almost in the Rudy stratosphere. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to have to humbly retract that statement based upon evidence so far.
Aye,
I'm
well,
not loving Vargas so far this season.
no, I'm with you. I'm with you. I can't remember when his lob attempt came. I think was it were we winning one? Were we winning 2-1 or was it at 1-1? I feel like it might have been when it was 1-0. And he, like you say, it was
Yeah, I think yeah,
I think it was at 1-0, or
it was early in the second half, I think.
I think it was still when it was 1-0, and he obviously the chance we're referring to, he got played through from a long ball. I think again it was from either Kent or Rolls. It was a long diagonal, and
Mm.
Vargas just
Yeah,
sort of bullies his way through two defenders and finds himself one on one with the Aberdeen goalkeeper who's come off his line. He's got Lawrence Shankland to one side of him. I'm going to give
yeah,
Vargas the benefit of the doubt and say maybe he doesn't see Shankland, maybe he's just focusing on the goal. But
yeah.
at the same time, if I'm Lawrence Shankland, I'm screaming at him to give me the ball. Despite Shankland not being in great form in front of goal himself, I think even Lawrence Shankland would have backed himself in front of an open goal, which is what it would have been effectively. But Kenny Vargas, I don't blame him for making the decision that he makes. To be honest
I
with
do,
you, I've watched I've watched it
I
multiple
do.
times, and I think it's the wrong decision completely. It's the wrong decision. He should have squared it, or he should have went round the goalkeeper, which is I'm sure what you'll
Yeah,
probably say. But I think in that moment,
absolutely.
uh, Kenny Vargas is a player that to me wants to do the fancy things. He wants to have a highlight reel.
Yeah,
He wants to be that flashy, name and likes kind of player.
yeah.
And that's
He's
fine.
about the moment and the postage stamp and the telly goal, and I think
Yes.
he's about himself before the team, which I think is fundamentally the problem. Like you just touched on there, he had acres of space on his left, and he had Shankland on his right, and he
Yeah.
decides to try and lob the goalkeeper from about 23 yards. And I think what led up to that is quite emblematic of the difference between the two sides. And when Hearts make a brain fart at the back, which unfortunately has been more prevalent than we would like this season, Aberdeen jumped on it. Um, in that scenario, there is a defensive mishap on Aberdeen's part. You should be making sure that you make the correct decision there every time because you're not going to get that many of those opportunities from Aberdeen this season. And instead of doing one of two obvious options that he had presented to him, he goes for the telly goal, and
Yeah.
it's just it's abysmal. Like
Yeah.
it
No,
really is.
completely. Completely. But then obviously we move on in the game, and again another set piece delivery comes in and it breaks to Blair Spittal at the edge of the box, and he lashed an absolute beauty into the bottom corner. I was
Yeah,
really, really happy for him because, like I said at the start, I thought he's certainly over the last couple of games has really started to kind of show what he's got. You can see his energy, you can see his fight, you can see that he's got something about him. And obviously, at the start of the season, we spoke on here about Blair Spittle being kind of shuffled all around the park, and the fact that he's come off a brilliant season last year for Motherwell, where he broke all the records in terms of assists and the stats and everything. He was their player of the season by some distance, as far as I'm aware, or certainly from my eyes. But maybe that's just because he's a Jambo now and I'm bigging him up. But
I know a certain guy
and
that would argue that a certain Mr. Halliday probably should have gotten tipped for that award more, but that's
well, he did his job at the weekend as well. He did his job at the weekend as well with that winner against the Hibs. So I'll give him that. But yeah, like Blair
get a
Spittle's a very
statue up in the plaza.
100%, mate. That's where he is. He's building it right now. I didn't want to touch on it, but he's polishing it as we speak. But no, what was I saying? I think like Blair Spittle's been a victim of it at the start of the season, and the sort of like you touched on the tactical changes and the changing of shapes and systems and things. And Blair Spittal seems to have been in Stephen Naismith's mind some sort of number six that's a tough tackling midfielder that can do the dirty work in the middle, when that's not Blair Spittle's game, and I don't really ever think it has been. He seems much more at home in that sort of more advanced number 8 role, which is kind of where he featured against Aberdeen and Minsk, and kind of drifting wide and kind of being that sort of link man with the forwards, which suits him down to the ground. And you can see that he's got the attributes to be that, and the work that he puts in, he was all over the park, and I was really, really happy to see that. And you can see the confidence that he seems to have at the moment, because he's found a place in that team that he can potentially nail down now that obviously Liam Fox is favouring him and picking him where he should be. And it is also an element of, the elephant in the room being a new manager is going to come in. So all of these players are auditioning for that. We don't know who that's going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, judging by Since I Was Young timing curse, by the time this gets released, we'll probably be announcing a new manager as we speak. But at the moment, at time of recording, we've not got anybody in the door yet.
I'm just going to go check the Hearts Facebook feed just in case.
Just keep me updated. Breaking news. But yeah, I was really, really pleased when Blair Spittal curled that one into the bottom corner. I thought it was a very, very well taken strike. And again, like you mentioned, it's the set piece delivery and the improvement in that. You can see that they're clearly working on that. And I think as one of the sort of fundamentals of the game, set pieces are opportunities to score. Like, you get presented with them. The number of corners that you can get in a game, the number of free kicks you can get in a game, if you work it right, there's always a chance you're going to score. Obviously, long-term listeners and short-term listeners of the channel know that I am an Arsenal fan, and we are the masters of the set piece at the moment, which obviously is paying dividends because it's free opportunities to score goals. And it was really, really good to see Blair Spittal put that one away, and it gave us a lead that maybe based off the first 45 minutes I would have said we deserved, but certainly the second half seemed a little bit more even in terms of how it was going. So getting that goal at that point was a massive bonus, wasn't it?
100%, yeah. Especially going down so early, the response to then equalise and then to get the lead, and not only get the lead, but get the lead in a bit of style. It's one of the first proper worldies that we've seen Hearts rip off. And like you say, I'm absolutely thrilled for Blair Spittal. He's a guy that since the Leyton Orient game that we attended together, we have been bemoaning the lack of consistency in where he's played. Like you say, I think he's certainly more of what the Italians would call mezzala than a ball winner. He's not a deep or a sitting midfielder, and I don't think, like you say, he ever has been. I don't know what possessed the previous management team to play him there. I know there was an element of needs must, but like, I feel like there were probably better options to play in that particular role than him. Like, he is a kind of more of a dynamic kind of player who likes to get forward and bomb forward, and he's an edge of the box kind of guy, as he showed at the weekend. So great timing on the goal as well. I think it was just as we had started to tail off of like that spell of dominance that we had, that's when the goal comes, and then that reinvigorates you a wee bit even more, to the point where you're now like, right, let's kick on, and can we maybe get the 3 points here that have eluded us since 2016, the 3 points in the league that has eluded us all season long. This could potentially be the day when we finally make a statement and say, right, that's 2 wins in a row. We're back. This is us. We're going to start to build more momentum. We've got a settled system. The attack is looking far more creative. The delivery, as we've mentioned, is much more better into the box. Shankland, of course, is slowly waking up. It was a great thing to see and a great time for it to come. And of course, what happened next happened. But by that point, you're thinking, right, we have a real chance to upset Aberdeen here.
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, what happened next happened. And in somewhat controversial circumstances that came out after the game, and Shankland gave an interview about what was discussed with the referee, John Beaton, not unlike him to be in the news with some form of controversy. Effectively, the Hearts players had a complaint in the build-up to the Nicky Devlin equaliser, where there was a free kick that was taken and the ball was apparently not stationary in the lead-up to that. So in the taking of the free kick, the ball wasn't stationary, which led to the Aberdeen equaliser, as I say. George Grant was then booked for dissent for questioning it. Lauren Shankland, in his role as captain, then spoke to John Beaton and asked him, will that be checked by VAR? Because it should be. It's resulted in a goal, so therefore it should be. I did read if it hadn't been a goal, then it wouldn't be subject to a VAR review, but due to it being in the lead up to a goal, John Beaton apparently said to Shankland, yeah, they're going to check it, they're checking it, it's been checked, it's fine. So, make of that what you will. But effectively, that then leads to the Aberdeen equaliser, which, like I said before, I felt in the first half we were the better team. I felt the second half was a bit more even, and Aberdeen started to kind of build a bit of a head of steam up in themselves. Even when we went 2-1 up, I felt like there were still more goals in the game as it proved to be. But yeah, never nice to concede directly after scoring, because there was literally, I think, 2 or 3 minutes from between the highs of the Blair Spittal goal to then end up equal again. But yeah, it all seemed very, very strange. And George Grant then apparently, well, obviously was dismissed later in the game. And I think I heard somewhere that he forgot, or he wasn't aware that he'd been booked already. Make of that what you will as well. But yeah, it was certainly controversial. But like I say, John Beaton is never far from controversy. What were your thoughts on that incident?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't notice the ball placement in the free kick in the run up to it, and I wasn't aware that there were any issues with the outcome of the goal until afterwards. It was really only today that I learned the ins and outs of the complaints that both Shankland and also Liam Fox had made. Liam Fox, in an interview, actually said that he spoke quickly to John Beaton, and John Beaton said that's on me. Like, he kind of owned up to the fact that he might have missed something there. Not really sufficient, quite frankly. Like, he's cost Hearts at least a point there, by the looks of things. I think certainly Grant's the second yellow was, you can't really refute it. There was probably a shout that would have potentially been a straight red on some days anyway. Like, the way he goes
Yeah,
in is not, it's not acceptable, and
no,
particularly in that scenario where we could potentially get a point away at Pittodrie, which wouldn't have been ideal after the first half. I felt like we at that point should have been chasing the game and looking to put it away and get the 3 points. But to get a 2-2 draw away to Aberdeen in the situation we're in, the situation they found themselves in, would have been fantastic. Wasn't to be. To get back to their second goal and the controversy surrounding it, the thing that really concerns me about it is what Shanklin says happened with him and the referee. If the referee has blatantly been untruthful towards the captain of Hearts and said, "Oh yeah, 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 it's all good. They'll check it." When the insinuation on Shank's behalf, at least, appears to be that he suspects it was not, in fact, checked. Like, he seems to be under the impression that they didn't bother their arses with it. That's a bit problematic, even for John Beaton. Like, you can't do that. You can't go to the captain of one of the clubs that are playing on a game and say, "Yeah, they'll check it. It's all good. It'll be fine." And then just not do anything about it. Like,
yeah,
that's kind of almost verges on bringing the game into disrepute. Like,
yeah,
referees are supposed to be respected. Referees are supposed to, you're not supposed to kind of question their honesty or their integrity. It's increasingly difficult not to do that, though, when they pull kind of nonsense like that. I do feel that that goal being awarded has cost Hearts in a pretty big way, not just in terms of the fact that Hearts were in front when it happened, but also the booking to George Grant, which, again, if he was completely unaware he had been booked, that is on the referee. The referee has to do his job properly. If he books a player, they need to know that they have been booked and exactly why. It's not really enough for Beaton to come out after the fact and say, "Oh, he was booked for dissent because of this and that." That's
mm,
not good enough, because
no,
then that being booked or not being booked completely changes how a player is going to play his game. If he knew he had been booked, that challenge probably doesn't happen. Even for a guy like a George Grant, who does have a history of hot-headedness, let's say, and he's had a couple of incidents where his kind of brain has switched off and he's ended up sent off in pretty big situations before. But this one isn't really entirely on him, with the only caveat to that being that on some days the challenge itself would probably have been a straight red anyway, because he did
yeah,
go in from behind and with studs up, I believe,
yeah.
certainly his
It
right boot.
was, yeah,
And he got none of the ball, so it was a reckless challenge anyhow.
yeah,
That
completely.
being said, though, the controversy surrounding that goal is not particularly acceptable at a top level. It's a top flight level that you're at. That's amateur hour stuff for the refereeing team, and to then after the fact say Alien Fox, "Oh yeah, that's my bad. Sorry," it's not good
Yeah,
enough. It's cost Hearts at least a
no,
point there.
Yeah, completely. And I think obviously the inevitable happens, and then obviously we go down to 10 men, and then
Yeah.
Aberdeen, to be fair to them, they do what they've been doing all season. They just stick in, and credit to Jimmy Fallon and his team for coming in and kind of putting this identity into Aberdeen. And I've watched them a few times. I said previously that I hadn't really seen much of them, but in the build up to obviously playing them at the weekend, I thought I better do my homework. And they have an ability to just get the ball forward. They don't, for want of a better phrase, they don't dick about with it. They just get it forward into
Yeah.
dangerous areas, which is how you're going to win games of football. And I think as well, having players on the bench that can come in and help that. They lost Papa Guy, the striker. They lost him for a considerable period of time to an injury prior to this game. But obviously, having Duck back from his holiday that he went on, he just decided to go AWOL. He's returned, and I was speaking to a few Aberdeen supporters that I know, and I said,
We've all done it, mate.
carry it off. Aye, absolutely. Well, we did it in
we
pre-season,
cheeky
apparently.
gallivant. Yeah, we
We
cheeky
had a cheeky
gallivant
gallivant
to Spain.
pre-season, but aye,
You did.
aye. So Duck, but I knew like it's one of those. He's the sort of player, and he's caused us a lot of problems in the past when he's come up against us. And he's a very good little player, just being direct and just running at you. And he caused young Adam Forrester, sorry, not young Adam Forrester, he wasn't on at that point, but he certainly terrorised Oyegoki, who was directly up against him at right back, to the point where Adam Forrester was brought on for Daniel Oyegoki just after the Nicky Devlin equaliser. But like I say, I think that's
Alan,
the difference.
only Forrester.
Yeah, that's it. I like it. I like it. But I think that's the difference between where we are and where they are at the moment. Their squad just feels a lot more balanced. Certainly looking at it from the outside, their squad feels a lot more balanced and they have options to bring on. Obviously, the two goal scorers, or well, the winning goal scorer comes off the bench. Ante Pal, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. I'm going to butcher it and say Palaversa.
Is
That
it
could be
Panavera? Paraversa, yeah.
Palaveras, something like that. But he comes off the bench with 15 minutes to go, and you're looking at that and going, right, well, they're bringing that kind of player on. As I say, they brought on Duke as well, who came on and made an impact. So we just don't have that due to an imbalanced forward line, shall we say, and options behind those that play.
What I would
Yeah,
say
like
to
I
that,
say,
actually, Alan, what I would say to that is we do have the players, I think. The problem is that we don't have the players in the right roles. We're
perhaps.
getting there, like we've said before, but like we've mentioned earlier in the podcast that I feel like Liam Fox has picked that 4-3-3 system with settling the team down and putting people into more natural roles in mind. And in large part, it is working. It's just a process that takes time. Ultimately,
Yeah,
we talked about this the last couple of times I was on. This work that Liam Fox is doing just now almost feels like it's the work we should have been doing in like the summer and pre-season.
yeah,
Like because we did make a lot of signings, and we do when you make that many signings, inevitably you're going to need to tweak some things in terms of your tactics. You want to be playing the best players at the club in their best role. What Aberdeen have is a settled system. They have impact players that they know they can count on, and they have players behind them that they know they can count on to give them the right service that they need. And in
yeah,
Aberdeen's case, a lot of that is putting pressure on defenders by playing long balls, playing direct passing. They play quite quick football, and they get the ball to their dukes and their Versas and whatever you want to call them.
Palaversa.
The Finnish lad that scored the winner, we'll just call him.
Aye,
Um,
fair enough.
Big Antoniemi Jr. We'll call him. So that's essentially the main difference, and it's not complicated. It's particularly
Yeah.
at our level of football. It's put the right players in the right roles and put the right players behind them in the right
Yeah,
roles to get the ball to them. And it
yeah,
goes, that each different phase of the pitch, it goes back each way. Get the right
completely.
defenders for the right job, and
Yeah,
ultimately
completely.
Hearts haven't been able to do any of that consistently. We're starting to
No,
get
but
there, but
yeah, but I think it's sorry to kind of interrupt you there. It's a point I was wanting to
no,
make as
absolutely.
well.
That's
I think what Aberdeen have at the moment that we don't seem to have, and we had it last year, is that, and I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, that never know when you're beaten, that never know when you're
Yeah,
out of a game, and that drive, and again that confidence to just put the ball in the back of the net because that's what wins you games. And
yeah,
you might not be
yeah.
playing particularly well. And again, I've spoken to Aberdeen fans that I know, and after the game, they were saying after the first 45 minutes, I didn't think we were going to win that game. And, they made the changes at the right times to get them the win, and fair play to them for that. And, I'm not going to critique Liam Fox for it because I don't think I don't think he could have really done anything else based off of what he has in front of him, to work with. I think Aberdeen just effectively took the game back, and ended up obviously getting the win, which like I say, after the first 45 minutes, I don't think anybody saw them winning that game. So that's where the frustration comes in for me, is that we had the game in our hands and we gave it away. Again, like you said earlier about individual errors and individual just lapses in concentration, you could put that down to George Grant doing that tackle. But then again, as you say, that's just in-game management. That's just whether he knows he's on a booking or not. I understand why he's gone in for that tackle, but like you said, that could have quite easily been a red card. And I don't think he would have had any complaints if it was a straight red. Whether he knows he's booked or not, don't do that. Don't put yourself in a position to potentially be sent off, because that did swing it for them. And obviously they had the extra man and they worked it. And like I say, they have this never say die attitude at the moment, which is refreshing in a way, to kind of see somebody else up there, having a go at Celtic and Rangers. And how long it will last is open for conversation. Obviously, their fixtures upcoming are very, very tricky, whereas ours kind of level out a little bit, if you want to say that. Which is again something we'll touch on as we go on. But yeah, as I say, the goal, the winning goal again was similar. Just a lucky break of the ball that falls to him and he hits a decent effort. But yeah, it was somewhat deflating when it hit the back of the net with 2 minutes to go.
It felt like you had 8 Hearts players off to Craig Gordon's right in the Hearts box doing very little. Like, how has no one stopped that ball from coming in? And then the Finnish lad, he's left with, again, just essentially an open goal. He's only got Craig Gordon to beat. And to be fair to him, it was a nice hit. Like, he's technically obviously quite gifted. The shot was very well taken and he placed it nicely. I don't know that there was any keeper in Scotland stopping that when he's got the amount of space that he had. Like, he certainly was under no pressure whatsoever. So it was essentially a training ground shot in his part. And fair play to the lad, he put it away. To get back to just quickly jump backwards towards the Grant sending off again.
Mm-hmm.
The stage of the game when that occurs is extremely important as well, I think, because you're at 2-2. You have a chance still at that point, very much so, to win the game. But at that stage of the game, a lot of the guys are going to be getting tired. A lot of tired legs are going to start to come through in the next 5 to 10 minutes from that point. So to get sent off at that particular stage in the game is crucial to Hearts losing that game, I think, because ultimately what you've done there is you have handicapped further a team that's already tiring. They had put in a fantastic effort in the first half, and it was going to take a massive effort to get anything out of that game from that point on anyway. Like, looked like we could potentially get at least a point if we were going to go on to win. It was going to take a massive exertion. To then take one player out of that equation and leave them with 10 men leaves them terribly exposed. And it was really no shock that Aberdeen went on to win it from that point. But sorry, to look back around to the third goal. Just disorganisation, again at back. We need to get more organised at the back. I mean, it's inexcusable at this point, because a lot of the guys as well that we have, we're not playing kids back there. Even if a Frankie Kent was uncharacteristically all over the place, I felt, at the weekend. Like, even your guys that you're counting on to be confident and to be disciplined and to get the ball out of the area, they're just not doing their job. And they're ending up, in Kyro's case, they're often ending up on their arse. Kingsley in the first minute gets decked, essentially. And he's under almost no pressure. It's a really poor way to give away the ball, and the disorganisation is just. It's almost like we've traded defensive organisation for set piece prowess and crossing. We can't have both, apparently.
No, it's true. But yeah, like you say, it is just silly individual mistakes that have plagued us all season and continue to do so. But I will say, and that this kind of takes me on to what I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit more. Liam Fox, when he was given the manager's interim job, he was basically quoted as saying that he knew that, I'm going to sort of quote it vaguely. He knew the job wasn't going to be his long term. He knew, his role was strictly interim to go in, steady the ship and start getting results. Now, there's been lots of conversation, obviously, as is prone to happen in an international break. When you don't have any club football, you start to talk about the club and you start to think, right, this is an opportunity for us to get a manager in now and get him to work with the players, etc., etc., which makes sense. Of course, it does. But and I had this conversation with somebody else, which is why it kind of prompted me to speak to you about it. I like what I've seen in the last two games from Liam Fox's side. I like the setup. I like the way that he has done away with the square pegs and round holes thing. I think the only one of those that is still a thing is right back. But our right back concerns are an issue that have been for a good few weeks now. Adam Forrester is a young lad that Liam has put his faith in. Obviously, the B team captain, he's brought him up with him and kind of said, right, you're going to be my guy. But there's clearly inexperience there, which is totally understandable because he's gone from playing lowland league levels to coming playing in the top flight of Scottish football and making his European debut. And to be fair to him, against Minsk, I thought he actually played very well. But against Aberdeen, there were moments where he was up against it for that last half hour where he was on the park.
Yeah,
But to that end, I like the Liam Fox system. I like the idea of the 4-3-3. I like that he's looked at that. Maybe the only concern I will have about it is the lack of pace in the wide areas. I think that's the one thing that for a 4-3-3 to be effective, for me, you need wingers that are pacey, that are going to hit the lines and get balls in, which is the one thing we've not seen. But the way that they work, if you've got Danda there, he's got creativity. You've got Spittal there, he's got creativity. You've got Vargas there. Well, he's Kenny Vargas. He could do whatever he wants. He could sky one over the bar or he could hit a raker in, who knows? But it's that unpredictability. And like I said it earlier on, I touched on it, Shankland is getting more service now, and we are seeing that. So that is a massive positive. And I think, to my mind, I think Liam Fox has potentially had a word with Shankland and said, right, stop drifting all over the park. Stay in an area where you're going to
yes,
get
yeah,
presented with opportunities, because I've noticed
aye,
that like he still has his moments where he drifts all over looking for the ball, which is entirely fair. But he tends to be more in the final third at the moment. Certainly in the last couple of games, I've noticed it, which is a massive, massive change because you're going to want your top goal scorer to be in that area to score goals. That's how he's going to get his confidence back and all that.
yeah,
So no, I do think Liam Fox has done a very good job. I think, you talk about, and I mentioned it, steadying the ship and then getting results. Obviously, the results is something that we hope will pick up. He's got a good win against Minsk in Europe, and then a point, or not even a point, against Aberdeen, sadly. Would have deserved it, but didn't get it. And the last minute equaliser against Ross County to get us a point in that game. So there are like signs of things happening to the point of, and this is kind of where I'll kind of move it on, the new manager situation that we're currently kind of going through at the moment and the uncertainty of who's going to be that man. Are you, I'm very much in the boat of, if it's Liam Fox for the St Mirren game, which is the first game after the international break, if he's still in the dugout, I'm not going to complain about that, because as much as I would love a new manager to come in tomorrow and have the next 10 days at time of recording to work with the players ahead of St Mirren, I'd be happy with that. But equally, I like what Liam Fox is doing. So if Liam Fox has this 10-day period to work with these players for a home game at Tynecastle against St Mirren, which, despite our poor form and our situation at the moment, that is a winnable game. If we're switched on, that's a winnable game. And if Liam Fox is the man to lead us through that and through this international break, I'm not going to complain about that, because I feel like the club have sort of said openly they're going to take their time to get the right appointment. They're going to make sure that they take their time and they do their due diligence and they get the right man. Obviously, what will be, and time will tell on that. But I, I'm kind of in a sense of, I'd love a new manager to come in tomorrow. But if Liam Fox is the man, at least for the short term, even if he gets another 3, 4 games, like our next 4 games, the furthest that we travel is Easter Road. We're not leaving Edinburgh for the next 4 games, which is a nice change. So that's an opportunity to get some points on the board and try and get the wheels turning on the season and get us off the bottom of the table. But do you want that new manager bounce to come in and help you with that? It's an interesting kind of conversation, but effectively I've rambled for a bit there. But my question to you, do you think that Liam Fox has steadied the ship, and would you be happy to see him, even for argument's sake, be in the dugout at Easter Road?
what I think I've seen from Liam Fox and from Lee Wallace and Angus Beath, the current interim management team, is a selflessness that is unusual to see in football management these days. And I think that the fact that they go into this role knowing it's interim plays a massive factor in that. Like, they're not auditioning for the job, they are there to right the ship, to steady the ship, as you put it. I feel that they have, if they haven't necessarily done it entirely, they have certainly put the building blocks in place for whoever comes in next to come in and complete that job. Obviously, whoever the next manager is going to have his own philosophy. So my fear there is that, does the next manager come in and rip up everything that they've spent the last few weeks implementing and then say, we're going to play a 5-2-1-2 and we're going to do this and we're going to do that differently? Or do Hearts have a short list of candidates from whom they have discerned that the best style of football to play for Hearts moving forward is going to be the system that Liam Fox and his team have put in place? I don't obviously know what's going on behind the scenes, but I'm wondering if the stark change to this settled 4-3-3 has been done with the new manager in mind almost. Like, have they identified like a list of candidates from whom they've decided that, right, this guy's likely to play at 4-3-3, is likely to use this player in that role? If I'm the Hearts hierarchy, that's what I would be looking to do. Like, while you're interviewing people, while you're talking to people, you would be asking about their football philosophy. You would be implementing pieces of that that you find as are patterns among the people that you fancy as candidates, and you would be implementing that now on the pitch so that when they come in, they're not having to start over from scratch. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever, but like, that's almost how I would want to be doing it. That's how I would want
No, I
Hearts to be
think
doing this. Like, I think ultimately the people in charge of Hearts should have had at least a short list in mind for quite a while by now.
yeah,
Naismith's dismissal was not a surprise to anyone. So they should really have been doing a lot of the homework and the prep work in the background before he was even gone. And I
yeah.
think that with the work Liam Fox has done, I guess to answer your question and to cut an extremely long ramble short, I think he has steadied the ship, and I think that he deserves like massive plaudits, I think, for the way that he's taken what looked like, earlier on you used the term sinking ship. It looked like a lost cause, this Hearts team, for the first several weeks. But in the couple of weeks that, in a few games since he's come in, we are not winning, we're not blowing teams away, but we're certainly looking a hell of a lot better. We're more creative. There seems to be a bit more confidence. The defence is still a big problem. But like you said, Adam Forrester, the young fella being put in there, I think he's worn it well. Like you say, the Aberdeen game, he did struggle a bit for that last half an hour. That might have been fatigue, because he did play in Minsk and he played very well, I felt, in Minsk.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
also, like I was saying earlier, the type of play that Aberdeen have, they put a lot of pressure on defenders. And when you put that kind of pressure on a young fella at that age who has just played his European debut like a few days earlier, his head's probably all over the place. You know, like
Yeah,
there are experienced, confident veteran footballers who would be rattled by like that experience of playing in Azerbaijan in front of no fans in Europe.
yeah,
You know, like, so to put that pressure on a young boy like that's shoulders is it's a big ask, and I think that that's telling of the trust that Liam Fox has in the youth at Hearts, which is something I've been screaming out for years. I think probably as long as
yeah.
you've known me, you've probably heard me rant and rave about how we should play the kids, you know, like, and I think that's wonderful that he's given that opportunity to Adam Forrester. And I mean, we could probably sit here and dedicate an entire episode to the intricacies of what Liam Fox has done right just in the few weeks that he's been in charge. So I'll cut that long story short and say yes, I completely agree with you, which is going to become to the surprise of absolutely no one, Alan. But yeah, I want a new manager in as soon as possible. If Liam Fox is still in the dugout for the St Mirren game, I'm going to be absolutely fine with that. If he's still in the dugout for Hibs, I'm not going to be raging, but I will start. I will be starting by that point to get a bit impatient with the board because they need to be decisive.
I'm
They
with you.
should have already identified at least a short list by now, and they should
Yeah,
have an idea for the style of football we're going to be playing the rest of the year, because it's not a lost cause, as Mark Donaldson pointed out on Scars Around the Funnel last week. Hearts have had starts that are quite similar in terms of like
Yeah.
league placement. Maybe not results, because this is officially Hearts' worst start results wise of all time, pretty much.
Mm.
But it's not a lost cause at all. In 1986, we had a shocking start to the season, and we were almost Scottish champions. Um, we've had seasons where we weren't great the first few months. Last season, we weren't particularly great the first few months, and we ended up finishing third at a canter because we went on a
Yeah.
fantastic run. But each week and each fixture that goes by, that's one less opportunity and one less chance that you get to make up that ground. And we're certainly not catching Aberdeen based on evidence so far. So something drastic we need to change at Aberdeen for that to happen. So it's the time is like as soon as possible to get the new
Yeah.
manager in. Yes, they have to
Yeah.
take their time to get it right, but like I say, they should already have a fairly strong idea of who it's going to be. They should have a short list of 5 or 6 people probably by this point at least.
Yeah, I think just before we kind of wrap up, I think one of the sort of things that we didn't speak about from the Minsk game, and certainly one of the most exciting or interesting parts of that game, was the Andrew McKinley update prior to the game even starting. When he was talking about it, and he gave a sort of update and said, we've had, that was when that 100 interested parties have come forward, but he
Yeah,
then mentioned that they whittled it down to a short list. I think it was about 7 or 8 names that they were then going to
yeah,
progress with. But I
yeah.
think
That's
to
exactly
their
what I wanted to hear, to be honest.
yeah, to their credit, I think I would imagine the interview process is well underway if it hasn't already been concluded, and I would imagine that they maybe know who they want, but there is that element of, if that manager is in a job currently, that then means they have to discuss compensation. They have to talk about the coaching staff
Yeah,
coming over as well, because obviously our entire coaching setup has been let go, so that'll need to be replaced as well. So it does have a lot of moving parts, and I think people that kind of think it's a simple, easy job to get a manager out and bring a new one in don't understand the
yeah.
intricacies of it, which is totally fair. But football fans are impatient about everything. We want a new manager in tomorrow
Aye.
to come in and excite the fan
Yeah.
base and give us that lift that we need. But I do think Liam Fox has done himself no harm at all. And I'm not an advocate for him to get the permanent job, and I don't think he will. I think if he did, there would be riots, with all due respect. But
I don't know that Liam
he's,
Fox wants the. I don't know that he even wants the job full time. Like I think
yeah,
he has a role at Hearts that he's quite happy to play, and I think
yeah,
he's very good at it. Forrester,
yeah,
again, to go back to him, is a fine example of it. He is brilliant with the kids. He, Lee Wallace, and Angus Beath are doing, I think, fantastic work with the youth setup. I don't
yeah,
think it's a coincidence that guys are coming through at a faster rate from the academy
mm,
into the starting lineup or going out on loan to other kind of top flight Scottish teams. So I don't necessarily know
definitely.
that he would even want the job. I think he's, like I said earlier, and to look back around to my first point, he is showing a selflessness that is very refreshing to see. He's he's
Absolutely.
he's there for the team first. He's there to make Hearts better, and he's certainly done that. In just a few weeks that he's been there, but I think he'll be more than happy to step aside for whoever comes in, and more than happy to work alongside them as well, and to work with the players and give 100% effort to them and attention to them in the interim, however long that's going to be, whether it be the next 10 days, whether it be tomorrow, whether it be a couple, 3 weeks from now, whether it be a month or two from now. I
Yeah.
don't see that being the case, but like you never
But you
know
never
about these
know.
things.
Yeah.
Like you touched on, actually, Alan, the financial aspect is something that is always comes into play here. We might choose someone and we might not be able to afford them, so they might have to go back to the drawing board. This can happen. It's real life isn't Football Manager or FIFA where you just click a couple of answers to questions and almost
Yeah.
always get the job. That's not how it
Yeah.
works in real life. There's so many
No.
different considerations to take into consideration here, like the football philosophy, the money. Will the players respond? And to your point about the new manager bounce, it would be nice to see. But when Naismith took over from Nielsen, we went on and we lost the following game
Yeah.
to Hibs. So it's
Yeah.
not always a guarantee that that's going to happen. I would rather that we keep the work up that we're doing and stay settled, work on the defensive inadequacies. And if Liam Fox is the guy to do that, I'm perfectly happy for him to do so because he's already earned the right to be there for as long as it takes, for my money.
Yeah, no, I'm very much with you on that, and I'll be very, very interested to hear what people listening and watching have to say about that. So please get your thoughts in the comment sections for the video, and we'll address them as we go along. But yeah, I think we've touched a lot of bases there, and we've covered quite a lot over the the last week in the life of Heart of Midlothian, and I'm sure the next couple of weeks will bring some news as well. Obviously, we head into a dreaded international break. It doesn't feel like it's been that long since the last one.
The second already of the season, and we're like, what, 7-8 games in? It's getting beyond a joke, mate.
It's crazy. The October international break is always one that I just cannot stand. But hopefully, and as I say, 10 days from now, from time of recording, we will be at home against St Mirren, back at Tynecastle for a run of 4 games. As I say, where our furthest trip is Easter Road. So hopefully we can get some momentum going and start to pick things up, whoever it be in the dugout, be it Liam Fox or some fancy Scandinavian that we've poached.
Valdas Ivanauskas back in.
Oh God, I was waiting on that. Between that and Daniel Stendhal, I've heard every name under the sun, mate.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for
get Levine back. Get Levine back. Better laugh.
Well, Klopp,
even if just for the Hibs game.
Can you imagine? Klopp was top of my list, but he's taking a job with Red Bull, so apparently he's off the table. But we'll see. And as I say, there's never a dull moment in the life of a Heart of Midlothian supporter, so I'm sure there'll be plenty of twists and turns over the next couple of weeks to come. Yeah. But I'm going to leave it there for now.
Rossi is out of a job, mate. Big Rossi's out of a job. That would be a dream scenario for me.
Can you imagine? Aye, right enough. But yeah, on that note, we'll leave it there for this week. Thank you very much for watching and listening. As I said at the start, please feel free to drop a subscribe in the comment section. I'm gonna give it this. But yeah, please feel free to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, do all the things with the socials. You'll find all the links in the description. And I'll place on record again my thanks to you, John, for coming on and waxing with me for a little while. All right. Anytime. Well, you take care. Have a good one, folks. And cheerio for now.
Thanks for having me. Bye, folks.